year of homeschooling and no exams, and it really has been the strangest time. It seems like the perfect moment to ask the big questions about education. And I am so delighted that this evening, 5 by 15 is partnering with Big Change on this special event on the theme of a new education story. And first up, I'm really delighted to be able to introduce Holly Branson, who is founder and trustee of Big Change. And she is one of our incredible partners for this event, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the ideas and inspiration that has brought us together this evening. Over to you, Holly.
Thanks so much, Daisy, and hello, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all to this new education story event that's been brought to you by Big Change and 5 by 15. And just thanks so much for taking the time to be with us this evening for what I know will be a fascinating exploration into how we can reimagine education together. As life finally gets back to normal, big fingers crossed, I expect that many of you, like me, have been looking back on the last year and have reflected on the changes that have been in our lives. Some that have been better, and some of them have definitely been for the worse. Education was one area that was totally transformed, and many millions of us had to adapt really very quickly. Teachers learnt new ways of teaching, and children learnt new ways of learning. And as parents, we now know way more than we ever did about what our kids are learning at school, how they're learning at school. And I've always really admired teachers before this, but gosh, I appreciate teachers more than ever now. And I'm pretty sure that I would have been given a requires improvement by Ofsted for my own homeschooling efforts. We've realized just how important schools are, and that's for relationships, that's for social skills, and it's for the support that goes way beyond the academic learning. So tonight is about taking a bit of time. It's about taking a bit of time to consider not only what's changed about the education system this year, but also think about what that might mean for the future. Is there anything we want to hold on to? Are we okay for everything to return to the way that it was? Or are there parts of the system that need a radical rethink? And I think fundamentally, what specifically needs to change for education to help young people thrive in life and not just exams? And that's Big Change's biggest motto, is just like, how can we make sure young children thrive in life and not just exams? This event is going to be the first of many public conversations that Big Change is supporting this summer. Conversations that give us all of us, parents, students, teachers, employers, the chance to think about and ask the big questions about education. Because we certainly believe that education is everyone's business and that everyone should have their say. And so you are all included in that. And we'll be in touch after the event to let you know more about our plans for a nationwide campaign to get people from across the country involved in shaping the future of education. Or if you want to take part immediately, you can sign up to bigeducationconversation.org. That's bigeducationconversation.org. So I'm super excited about this evening. We have 5 amazing speakers who I know will challenge us and who will inspire us with their amazing stories. And so I'm going to hand over to Daisy now to introduce them. And again, just thank you so much from me for joining us this evening. And I hope you have a really lovely time. Over to you, Daisy.
Thank you. Thanks, Holly. That was fantastic. And thanks for setting out the goals and kind of inspiration behind this session. So it's over to me to introduce our first speaker this evening. And it is a huge honor to have him with us. Adam Grant is joining us from America, where he's professor at the Wharton School, and he needs very little introduction, of course. He's hugely well known as an organisational psychologist, TED speaker, and a leading expert on motivation and meaning and creativity. And he's the author of 5 best-selling books, and his most recent book is called Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. It's out now. And over to you, Adam. Welcome, and thanks for being here.
Delighted to be here. I've been doing a lot of rethinking this past year about education, but the moment that really changed my thinking about education happened over a dozen years ago. I met a sociologist named Wayne Baker, And he and his wife, Cheryl Baker, an entrepreneur, had observed that something was going wrong in classrooms and in communities of all kinds. There were a lot of people who were happy to help. There were a lot of people who needed help, and they weren't necessarily connecting. They decided they would create a little exercise to solve this problem. They called it the Reciprocity Ring. And the basic idea was that they were going to gather a group of students or colleagues, and they would invite everyone to make a request for something they wanted or needed, but couldn't get on their own. And then they would challenge everybody else in the group to try to use their knowledge and their networks to fulfill the request. And they started launching this exercise with students, and they saw some unusual requests. One student said, "My dream is to see a Bengal tiger in the wild." No one had ever set foot on a continent where that was even possible. But a few people offered to help. And a month later, this guy was able to fly out and live his lifelong dream of seeing a Bengal tiger in the wild. Now, unfortunately, the tigers got loose. No, just kidding. But never would have happened if the request had not been crowdsourced to a group of people with different knowledge and different connections. I saw this happen and I thought, I have to start doing this in my classroom at Wharton. I want to get students in the habit of offering help and supporting their peers, but I also want to give them the chance to seek it. And I think the mistake that so many of us make is we need help. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to look incompetent. We're trying to be self-reliant. We don't want to be a burden to others, so we don't ask. And if we do ask, we only go to the people that we know well, our strongest ties, who we trust to be able to help us and that we think we can help back in the future. The problem with that is we actually get more meaningful help and more creative solutions from our weaker ties, who travel in different circles, who learn different things, who meet different kinds of people, and can open up fresh access to ideas and opportunities. So the Reciprocity Ring was a way to unlock those weak ties, to allow students, to empower students, to seek help from people they had hardly ever interacted with before. And I decided I was going to take it into my classroom. One of my favorite requests came from a student named Alex, who said, "I haven't told a lot of people this, but my dream is to work at an amusement park like Six Flags. I think roller coasters are nirvana. I would love to be part of that. But Six Flags does not recruit at the Wharton School of Business. Does anyone know a way to get my foot in the door?" And I'm looking around thinking, what are the odds that a bunch of 20 and 21-year-old students could possibly help with that? Few students offer to do simple 5-minute favors. And a few weeks later, Alex comes into class and I ask for an update. And he says, "I just got off the phone with the former CEO of Six Flags." And I thought, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened in my classroom. Did he get you a job? Did he open up other connections in the industry? Alex broke out into a huge grin. And he said, "I now know I never want to work in that industry." And I was depressed for a little while. But then I realized that having ruled out that dream, Alex could move on to pursue others. The idea behind the Reciprocity Ring completely changed my thinking about the culture in a classroom. The first thing that I learned is there are lots of students who are very happy to help each other if only they knew who needed their help and what they were looking for. Normalizing help seeking, making it easy for people to ask and bring a request to the table is the single most important driver of anything we can study of building a culture of generosity. That was a little bit more difficult as we moved into an online world. And one of the things that I ended up doing was running our online version of the exercise. It's called Give a Toss, where students could go into an app and submit their requests, and then they could sign up if they thought they might be able to help each other. I was worried that it wouldn't have the same magic as doing it face to face in the room. What I'd always done with the Reciprocity Ring was have students write their requests on a flip chart and then post them around the room, and then they'd walk around, sign up where they thought they could pitch in, and also get to know each other a little bit in the process. And that part was just completely missing online. So I decided to do something that I'd never done before as a teacher. I reached out to my entire listserv of alumni, all my former students, and I said, "We're going to be doing an online version of that exercise that we did in class. We would love for you, if you're available, to come into the Give a Toss platform and sign up to help." I was teaching a class of 80 students. I had 150 alumni come in live as a complete surprise, and they all volunteered their knowledge and their networks to try to help out the current students. It is the most powerful thing I've ever watched happen in my classroom when it comes to building a genuine culture where people are happy to help and support each other. My undergraduates reported later that they were blown away that alums who had never met them would show up, pay attention to what they needed, and then try to contribute to help solve their problems. Now, obviously, this is easier to do with older students, but even in primary school, even with young kids, there's a Danish tradition called cake time, where once a week, one student is in the spotlight and presents a problem or a challenge, and then the whole class is invited to help problem solve. And it's I think, a young child's version of going through this give a toss exercise or the reciprocity ring. It's called cake time because the student whose problem it is also brings a treat for the class to eat. But I think it's a wonderful way of cultivating empathy and getting students to really think about how they can support each other, as opposed to just how they can outperform each other. That was the second challenge that I faced in my classroom at Wharton. I had a lot of students who came in thinking that the definition of success was to outdo their peers. They were used to being graded on forced curves where another student's failure meant their success. And it was pretty hard to get them to think about collaborating with each other. The reciprocity ring exercise, the give a toss experience helped to overcome some of that. But I still had students who bought into a zero-sum view of success and thought, you know what, if I help my classmates ace a final exam, then that might hurt my own performance. I decided to rethink the way that I graded students. I wanted to motivate them to study study together. We have known for years that the best way to learn is to teach someone else. Right? When you explain material to other people, you come to understand it better. You also remember it better, which makes it easier to retrieve it. So I was curious about what I could do to get students to study together. And I decided that I would turn the final exam into a little bit of a challenge around who knows what. I generally write a very difficult final exam, and the hardest part is the multiple choice questions. It relies on students completely mastering the material that I cover in my course on work in psychology. And there are always students who are worried that they're going to just completely miss a few answers, and that's going to undermine their performance on the test. So I did two things. Number one, I said, I will never curve downward, but I will curve upward. Whatever the gap is between the highest score and the perfect score, I will add that amount to everybody's score so that the best performer in the class actually raises everybody else's final grade. But more importantly, I'm also going to give you a chance on the multiple choice questions to identify the hardest question, the one that you're most uncertain of. And I'm going to ask you to write the name of the classmate who you think knows the answer. If they get that question correct, you get the points too. I rolled this out a couple of days before my final exam one fall. I was blown away by what happened next. A group of students had started an email list. They got every single student on that list, and they divided and conquered to say, we're going to identify experts for every single topic in this course so that everybody knows who's specialized in what information. And they put those students in charge of writing summaries for everyone else, of explaining their knowledge to the class. And I found that as a result of that, students not only got better grades because they were able to identify who would know the information they were missing, they actually did better on the rest of the multiple choice questions too. The average class score went up by about 3% when I introduced that small incentive. And it wasn't something that really changed their overall test performance at all. Overall, the multiple choice question that they wrote down a classmate's name was only 2 points on a 150-point exam. And yet that subtle incentive took away the disincentive to cooperate and collaborate. It encouraged them to say, you know what, there's a lot we could learn from each other and teach each other. And I've maintained that incentive ever since. And every single semester, students get together to study together, and they end up learning more because of that. It sounds like an incentive in some ways, but what I've ultimately realized is I'm really just removing the disincentive to collaborate. Students are naturally eager to compare notes, to share information with each other, to try to help each other learn. All that was standing in the way of that was a forced grading curve that prevented them from thinking that they could actually still excel if they tried to help each other succeed. And I wonder how many other grading and incentive systems we might be able to rethink in a similar manner. One of the things that happened as I was starting to make these changes to my course is I started teaching students the importance of thinking again. I started teaching days of class where the entire message was, we hold assumptions, we have knowledge, we have opinions that are often wrong, and we need to be open to rethinking and reconsidering those. And one day after I taught that class, a student came up to me and told me that I was not following my own principles, which is the kind of feedback that I always look forward to as a teacher. And I asked why, and the student said, well, you teach this whole class on evidence-based management and psychology. You never give us the opportunity to question the principles you teach, because we don't always have the randomized controlled experiments and the longitudinal studies and the meta-analyses. And so it's hard to challenge your data with our lack of data. And as I thought about that, I realized that they were onto something. I decided that I was going to create an assignment toward the end of the semester where students were tasked with challenging one of the core assumptions of the class. I sent them off to work in pairs. They could film a mini TED Talk or record a mini podcast episode where they called into question one of the main ideas we had covered in the course. Their job was to find evidence to back up their challenge. So they had to, in some cases, comb through journal articles. In other cases, search for information on what various kinds of experiments were underway. And I was just, at first, floored by the ingenuity of the ideas they had. And then secondly, impressed by the creativity they brought to the delivery. I will never forget the group of students, it was actually a trio, who gave a TED Talk on the problems with TED Talks, which was very meta. I ended up loving it so much that I played it for the whole class. And I think that that's the kind of thing teachers need to do more often in the classroom. I think we need to give students a chance not just to internalize and memorize all the information we teach, but to question it, to poke holes in it, to identify the limitations of knowledge. One of the things we do when we give students that opportunity is we actually teach them that knowledge is always evolving, right? That the things that you learn in school today might not be true, all of them, tomorrow. And I wish I had been taught that, because I remember finding out not too long ago that Pluto might not be a planet, and I was devastated. It shook my worldview. What do you mean Pluto's not a planet? What do you mean there might only be 8? Are you going to randomly add a 10th? Is it possible you're going to declassify Earth as a planet? Do we not live in a solar system? It was very unsettling. And I think if I had teachers who encouraged me to rethink some of the material that we were learning, I would have been a little bit less upset by discovering that one of my core beliefs was not true. So this is an ethos I've wanted to bring into my classroom, not just with this assignment of doing the mini podcast or a mini TED Talk, but much more broadly in saying, let's encourage students to challenge each other's thinking and my thinking as the teacher whenever they have ideas. And again, moving into a virtual classroom this past year, I was worried that we were going to lose a lot of the fire of that. One of the things I did in Zoom was, with a couple of colleagues, we said, let's create hashtags so that we know when students want to jump into the conversation. We introduced hashtag question if you had a question. And I would scan the chat and I'd pause every few minutes and call on the people who asked questions. We introduced hashtag on fire. If you had a burning question or burning comment and you wanted to desperately get into the conversation now, we would turn to you. I would actually stop in mid-sentence if I saw on fire. And that way you knew you could jump the line and your voice would get heard. We had a hashtag, I added one later, hashtag aha, so that I could track the eureka moments that students were experiencing. And sometimes I found out that the message I thought I was teaching was not getting across. Other times I found out that there were epiphanies that I didn't even realize were important. And that's helped me figure out what to keep in the class moving forward. The most important hashtag, though, by far that we used was hashtag debate. I said, if you disagree with anything that I present or anything one of your classmates says, I don't think we have enough diversity of thought in the classroom. I don't think we have enough people questioning and challenging each other to think again. So let's do that. And I found that I got a lot more diverse opinions. I got a lot more dissenting views as a result of that, which last time I checked is part of the point of education, right? To teach critical thinking and to foster it. And one of the highlights for me of teaching virtually, there were a lot of things that were hard, no question. There were days when I felt like we were violating the first law of thermodynamics, because supposedly energy can neither be created nor destroyed. But I felt in a lot of classes, kind of like some of you have felt, that I was sending more energy into the Zoom window than was coming back at me. And I wondered where it all went. But one of the real silver linings was the quality and depth of discussion in the classroom. I had deeper discussions via Zoom than I have ever had at any point in my teaching career. And the chat window really opened that door, because for the first time in my whole career, instead of just calling on a random hand that was raised, I was able to choreograph the conversation, to call on people who wanted to dig a little bit further into a topic, to bring into the conversation voices who wanted to complicate the discussion we were having and maybe even turn it upside down. And my hope is, even when we move back into a physical face-to-face classroom, that there's a way to keep the engagement of the chat back in the conversation. Those are some mechanisms that I've gotten excited about for not only encouraging students to think again, but also for pushing me to think again. And I hope some of you will give them a shot, try them at your own risk. Thank you.
Adam, thank you so much for being with us. That was so thought-provoking and challenging. And I love what you said about cooperation and collaboration and about #debate and the conversation, which I hope we're going to have and continue after this evening. So thank you very, very much for being with us. And your book, Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know, is out now in the UK, and our bookshop, Newham Books, have plenty of copies. And I hope that lots of people in the audience will get a copy if they haven't already. So thank you very, very much for being with us. And now I am going to introduce our next speaker, who is the fantastic Laura McInerney. She's a columnist for The Guardian, and she's a former editor of Schools Week, and she's the founder of Teacher Tap and Parent Ping, which is uncovering the secrets of thousands of parents and teachers. She was also once taken to court by Michael Gove after asking a difficult question about free schools, which I'm very interested to know more about. I don't know if we're going to find out about that tonight. And she's regularly heard on the BBC, and we are honoured to have her with us to talk to us this evening. Welcome, Laura, and over to you.
Thank you, Daisy. And I'm afraid tonight I'm not going to talk about the court case for once, but if anybody else ever does want to read about that, if you Google me, I'm probably being taken to court. So Laura McInerney taken to court, you can learn more about it. But tonight instead, we're going to be talking about the future of education and actually what's a big idea for how it might change. I am going to share my screen and some slides here just so that you've got a little bit of illustration as we go along, because I am the co-founder of two apps, Teacher Tap and Parent Ping. Tonight going to be talking specifically about schools and an idea that started back in 2019 and has come back again. So I want to share it with you. Just so you're aware, Teacher Tap is an app that any teacher can be on, predominantly in the UK, although we have some other countries as well. It's free to download. If you are a teacher, please do. And it means you can take part in research each day. It asks 3 questions, might be as simple as where you had your lunch, or it might be something about the children, perhaps their behavior, what they were learning. And it's meant that over the pandemic, every single day, we were able to find out about what was happening in school, if school was open, or at home, if children were at home. And we've learned a ton. Tonight, we could have talked about AI, could be talking about online platforms, could be talking about how homework has changed. But instead, I'm going to go for an idea that I actually first raised in 2019. And it's a set of numbers, a set of numbers that drives almost everything about school education here in the UK and in many other parts of the world as well. And those numbers are these: 9 till 3:30. 9 till 3:30, 9 roughly when schools start. If you're in a school, yours might be 8, 8:30, and again, some finish at 3 or 3:15. But roughly, if you look across the UK, the majority of schools are open for 6.5 hours from 9 till 3:30. And when my friends who had children started to realise this, they phoned me and they would say, Laura, what am I supposed to do with my kids at 9 till 3:30? I need to be in work before 9 and I can't pick them up at 3:30. They found it outrageous that this were the hours of schools. And of course, it makes a lot of sense. In a world right now where I can have Amazon bring my shopping, something as simple as my groceries in a couple of hours, or I can go to the DIY store and get paint in exactly the colour that I'm expecting it to be in, we think that our services should be convenient at the very least and customizable ideally. And yet schools, 9 till 3:30, you don't get to pick the time, you don't get to pick what's going on around it, 9 till 3:30. And so I started to think about whether this could change. But the problem is that schools are a little bit like factories. And I don't mean this in a stereotypical sense. You often hear people, especially on talks like this, and maybe some of the speakers will say it later, but the idea that schools are assembly lines, that they're just there to put out identikit children. I don't think that's true, actually. We don't have a kind of onward churn of children all the time. But what schools are, if we're being honest in our heart of hearts, and I was a teacher, so I say this as someone who took part in it, schools are batch managers. Often as a teacher, you don't really teach individual children, you teach whole classes. And as a school, one of the logistical problems is how do you get 1,500 children in the door at the same time? How do you put them into classes? How do you move them around a school in an efficient way? And at the end of the day, how do you get them out? And if anybody thought that wasn't a huge part of what happens in schools, we only have to look at all of the logistical efforts that have gone in over the past year to make sure that children can move around the school or be timetabled in a safe and efficient manner. So 9 to 3:30 isn't some awful thing that schools have concocted to be mean. It's simply a way of ensuring efficiently that children are getting their schooling. It doesn't necessarily work anymore, though. Now, I realize that there are some people sitting, if you're listening right now, you might be thinking, well, it works for me. I like being able to work in the day and have my children go away. It was a real pain when schools were closed. And actually, I quite like picking my children up at 3:30. I strongly believe that children shouldn't go to school any longer. And when I've said before now that school should go on for longer, a lot of people will say to me, my child will be too tired, my child will be too hungry. That's fine. I'm okay with that idea that it's not for everybody. But still, 9 till 3:30. It is a public service failure when lots and lots of people who want to get their children educated simply cannot make it work around this timing. And let's just take some simple examples. I'm an optician, I work in a shop, that shop is open till 5:30 p.m. What is my child doing between 3:30 when they finish school and the time when I have to work? If I'm lucky, I'm able to pay for them to go somewhere, but a lot of the time, actually, children just have dead time. They're either wandering around, they're on their own, they're at home without adults, or they're being shoved from pillar to post. Let's take another example. People who run hotels or who work in the hospitality industry. In fact, any of the around 25% of adults in the UK who work some part of the weekend. If you work in a weekend and school holidays, when do you see your children? There are people whose entire industry makes it very, very difficult for them to spend quality time with their children. And instead, what they do is they take their children out of school during term time to have time with them. How do we know that? Well, we can see it in the attendance records around the country of rural and tourism areas. But also we saw in the pandemic, those areas that have lots of tourism, actually their attendance went up during the pandemic because the children weren't being taken out to go on holiday with their parents because their parents were around during the holidays. So this is a real thing. It has an impact on absences. And so I started to think a few years ago and write about the idea that perhaps, what if some schools, not all of them, but some schools had flexible learning? What if it was possible, say, Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday that children go to school and then they take home some lessons Thursday to Friday, which can be done online. But instead of doing them on the Thursday and Friday, they could do them on the Saturday and Sunday, and their parents could see them on the Thursday and the Friday. What if there were some schools where they packed everything in on a longer day, Monday to Thursday, and it meant that every weekend their parents could see their children Friday, Saturday and Sunday because perhaps they were away for those other 4 days and they missed out on lots of bedtime. So I thought, what if some schools had flexible learning? And I got laughed at. I got absolutely roundly laughed at. I wrote this in an article in 2019 for the Centre for Education and Youth, and so many people came to me and they said, oh, Laura, that's such a nice idea. It's a great idea, but frankly, it just isn't possible. There's simply no way that we could create a school system where some children are in school and some children are out of school and they're learning the same things. It just isn't possible that teachers could try and teach from home or teach children remotely. It isn't possible, they said, until, of course, it was. And last March in the UK, schools closed. They were given 48 hours notice and the children had to go home. And many schools grappled together and they managed to make various types of online learning work. But in particular, one of the most successful was a group run by Oak National Academy, funded by the government and given a lot of money to pull together an online video curriculum. Now, not only did this mean that children could learn from anywhere at home, but actually when they came back to school in the September and children were in and out because they were in bubbles and they had to get tests, and if it was thought you had COVID, you had to stay at home. The UK brought in the legal requirements that children in school and out of school must be able to have the same lessons. And it meant for a period of time, if any child was at home for any reason, whether they were in hospital with a broken leg, whether their school was, whether their house was snowed in, whether they had to get on a plane and go to see a family member who was very, very sick on the other side of the world, those children were all able to access their curriculum just the same as the children in school. And now it wasn't a funny question anymore. It wasn't what if some schools had flexible learning. It was what if schools had to have flexible learning, every single one of them. And of course, it's been incredibly challenging. I can see from the data that teachers don't love this. Given the choice, the vast majority prefer to be in school. But we also know from TeacherTapp, from asking teachers day by day about their experiences, that there are around 8% of teachers who would prefer their job to be resource creation. That there is a small percentage, around the same number, 8 to 10% of teachers who would like to work remotely, doing remote learning all of the time. And there's another group of teachers, around 30%, who would happily have hybrid, some of the week at home, some of the week away. And so I have to think again, 9 till 3:30, is that genuinely the best that we could do? Or can we think like the DIY store? Can we think like Amazon? And at least in some schools, can we think about convenience and customization? Is it possible that schools could add on hours so that it would always be possible for a parent to be able to select extra hours for their child for free and make sure they're engaged, not necessarily in school time, but at least in additional learning, at least in making sure that those young people have access to youth clubs, to their peers in a safe environment? Is it possible that we could have any day schools, a school where they say you have to come and turn up for 3 days a week, but the rest of your work could be done on any day, and enable those families who otherwise don't see their children because they work on weekends to have time with them? And could we have online schools? Not every school doing this, but at least some, so that children with long-term illnesses or those who fly backwards and forwards between different countries for a variety of reasons are able to continue their education, and it doesn't have to be done in a disrupted way. Ultimately, the new education story needs to be just like with workplaces, not just if we had flexible working, but what if schools had flexible learning? Because it will enable more families and more children to make sure they're accessing education and time together. And I honestly think if the school sector doesn't do this, then ultimately other businesses and other private endeavours will start to peel it away, and we will lose as a state sector some of the great flexibilities that have enabled families to work, to educate their children exactly as they want to for many, many years. Thank you.
Laura, thank you. Thank you so much. That was so inspiring and thought-provoking, and based on this incredible insight and data that you have collected. So just thank you so much for giving us such a timely insight and for being with us. And yeah, see you again very soon. Thank you. So next, it is a thrill to be able to introduce Jaden Caulfield, who is an award-winning activist and a trailblazing campaigner from North Manchester, and he's currently studying at Oxford, studying PPE. He began fighting for change 7 years ago at Reclaim, a charity that aims to create the next generation of working class leaders, and he launched national campaigns and he's given talks across the country. Jaden is a trustee for Rekindle and an advisor for Big Change, and he's a project manager for Ashoka, and he has founded a new online venture which is called Outliers. So welcome, Jaden, and thank you very much for being here with us. And I think you are on mute, but you're over to you. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I hope we're all okay. And yes, attending university is a great honor, but it is also a world away from anything I have ever experienced before, and at times can seem so surreal, and at times emotionally overwhelming. During my time in education, the deprivation and poverty I experienced have been a constant topic of discussion. But I do not feel affronted by that. I take solace in the fact that just as I find it difficult to imagine the childhood of some of my peers, they would find it just as difficult to imagine a childhood devoid of all the things they took for granted. The first 10 years of my life was completely different than the years that followed. I was raised in Salford, in what was then one of the most deprived postcodes in the Northwest, an area blighted by crime, violence, and drugs. And as extreme as child poverty gets, I have experienced it. And I say this not for pity. I do not want that, nor will I ever appreciate it. I say this because my story is not unique, but it is rare that someone from a similar background is ever given the opportunity or platform to be heard. And so it's for those children without a voice I represent, the silent voices of the many children whose trials and tribulations through education are never heard. I have lived in hostels, been involved in the care system, missed most of primary school, gone hungry to the point of pain, and witnessed the destructive nature of addiction. I have lived the life you all write about, the life you research, the life you all think only exists in dramatic adaptations like Shameless and I, Daniel Blake. And I genuinely wish it did only exist on a screen. But let me flip it though. My brother and I, at the ages of 10 and 6 respectively, were adopted by my grandparents, and our lives changed overnight. Those small things that most take for granted were the things that changed my life. A feeling of warmth and belonging, a household full of love and caring, a clean home, regular meals, 100% attendance throughout school, which took me from a set 4 to a set 1 in just a few months. Grandparents who dedicated their time and relentlessly emphasized how essential a good education is, teaching us how to read, introducing me to classics like Of Mice and Men, 1984, Lord of the Flies, and such. And they were the first books I ever read, which is quite strange. They would teach us vocabulary and many other vital lessons that have allowed me to thrive. I had my first proper experience of school, and I was too far behind to be of any use to the grading system. My school placed me in bottom sets, as if my grandpa would allow that. He turned our home into an educational sanctuary and did everything it took to bring me up to scratch. And because of his nurture and the environment he provided outside of school, I thrived. Just so you appreciate what it took to make a Jaden though, and why I will never appreciate anyone using me as an example of what children with similar lived experiences can become. At 11 years old, I joined Reclaim and became the protege of Ruth Ibegbuna and Katie Cosgrave. And for the next 7 years, I would go on to be carefully mentored by both women who dedicated 7 years to making my dreams theirs and doing anything it took to see me in a space of power. It is the many individuals who have worked alongside my grandparents to show me that I was worthy of any academic dream. They held a mirror in front of me and allowed me to see my reflection in a system that I felt had neglected me. I have been mentored by some of the most influential individuals and have had opportunity that many could only dream of. The type of opportunity that my grandpa often says equates to winning the lottery. On paper, I'm an overachiever. In reality, I am 8 years of hard work from multiple individuals. So yes, I have experienced extreme poverty, but I have also been provided with a world of opportunity. I've seen the very worst and the absolute best of education that this country has to offer. I've seen the difference that a little privilege can make. The sad truth is that I cannot ever hope to build a world where every child is given the opportunity that I was given. It is impossible. However, I should not have to dream of that. The difference in educational standards should not be so severe for those students who attend schools in deprived areas. Our current education system values success above survival, and that is where we go wrong. And I don't have the answers to it all. I wish I did. But as someone who knows what it takes to survive in a system that undervalues them and be nurtured by opportunity beyond the building, I can tell you that we can't just build a new curriculum. We have to reimagine every aspect. In my 8 years of change making, I've done a lot to try and change the system, from proving that academic dreams are achievable, though hard to reach without opportunity, to working with some of the world's biggest organisations and trying to build a more hopeful future for young people. But it's in my most recent role that I've witnessed what it takes to build a better and more hopeful system. My greatest learning experience is from the unapologetically bold and radical visions of Rekindle School. And I'm going to try and hold it together as I tell you all about Rekindle, but it is my absolute heart, and so I often struggle. A youth-led new approach to education based in South Manchester. It places support and nurture at the forefront of everything. I'm a co-creator alongside 7 other incredible young people and 2 elders, and we are building the school we wish we had attended. It is the vision of Rekindle that has given me hope during the constant doom and gloom of algorithm failures, zero tolerance behaviour hubs, and refusing to feed children. We set out on a journey to build schools and curriculums that the world needed, teaching the lessons and life skills that were often forgotten in mainstream education. We created Rekindle School out of a strong sense of despair at the current education system. We wanted a school that nurtured, a curriculum that taught essential life skills, and a place where young people from working class backgrounds felt safe to escape and become empowered by knowledge. We built the school we wish we'd attended and made sure that it was built by young people for young people. And with the bold visions that a school led by young people could have, we've created a safe space that will open 4 till 8 every weeknight. And each child will have a dedicated homework mentor and a hot meal every night. And I know how much that matters. Because when the government tried to fail young people by refusing to extend their free school meals, and Marcus Rashford stepped forward, we had made the promise that every child would leave our school with a satisfied stomach. We also promised to value critical thinking, to embed it heavily within our curriculum so that young people are comfortable to ask why and then ask why again, so that they know that they are worthy of a true answer. We open Saturday mornings and 50% of all holidays, so that we are doing everything we can to maintain our promise of being there when young people need us most. It is in building this school that I have learned the most about education and what it takes to build a school that believes in the value of each individual child. Education is a failing system, and it fails different communities at disproportionate rates. Yeah, some of that is due to the lack of engagement from individuals within those communities. But we also must question whether the education system was ever built to see certain people succeed. Was it ever built to see kids like me succeed? It's not school that got me here. It was everything outside of this school. And that is what we must focus on, as well as a new curriculum. We must ensure that education and opportunity continue outside of the school gates. There are a few key lessons I want you to take away from this. Lesson 1 is accountability. As a system and as individuals, we must learn to hold ourselves and each other accountable for the failures. But first, we must recognise why and how we have failed. Our government must learn to hold up their hands and apologise. Apologise for an algorithm that was created to willingly disadvantage certain students and overpredict grades to others. Apologise for refusing to feed young people when they needed you most. But apologise and learn. Lesson 2 is co-leadership. Remember that young people are living in this system right now. They are the future, and the future that your decisions will impact. Invite them around the decision-making tables and listen to their experiences. Yes, some of them will tell you to build a pool in the playground, but the majority will simply dream of a better education. Do not listen to them as passive tokenistic gestures, but as an active learning process for understanding the things to avoid and the things to improve. Young people are willing to help build a better future. They are unwilling to be tokens. They're not hard to reach. You're simply not trying. Take care of our children. That's lesson 3. We have a success before survival approach to education. We see the grades before the individual person, and we overcomplicate a system that has no need to be so complex. This past year has made it noticeably clear that our young people are not getting the support they need. We need mental well-being so we know how to deal with the stress of a constant cycle of academic pressure. I want to see our young people do more than just survive in this system. I want them to thrive. I recently started an organisation that will see mental health workshops and after school clubs take place in high schools across Greater Manchester and one day wider. My big dream is that one day my organisation is not needed because schools will value the well-being of every child. So those are my top tips for moving forward in education. From this, I want you to remember one thing. With opportunity and a new approach, We could have a country filled to the brim with students who excel in any environment, not just in school. I know that some of you listening may be sending your children to private schools. And to that, I say, even if your child is getting the best out of education, imagine your life changed overnight. That same child was thrown into an underfunded mainstream school in the middle of a working class estate with 40 children per class. You can no longer use your cultural capital to influence their future. Imagine if all your child had was themselves and their dreams, and that's all that can move them forward. And once you've imagined that, help us build the system that you would want your child to attend. Help us build the school that you would want them to be thrown into. As a kid who made it from one of the most deprived estates in the UK, being homeless and missing the first 10 years of education, to university, to building a school and a better education at the age of 19 years old, I have witnessed what it takes to build an education worth falling in love with. It's not about conformity or passive learners. It's about young people taking an active role in shaping their future. And then it's about young people taking an active role in shaping their future and then taking every opportunity that is thrown at them. But in order for that opportunity to happen, the opportunity has to be there. The final takeaway is something super achievable. Everyone in this virtual room has the power to listen. And many of you have the power to provide opportunity, or at least build it. So listen to what young people need and then rebuild that opportunity. Remember, accountability, co-leadership, and please take care of our children. Thank you.
Jaden, thank you so much. That was so incredibly powerful and inspiring and hopeful, and a demand really for everyone to do better, to create a better system. And really thank you so much for sharing your words and your story. It was an unforgettable talk, and I think will have a powerful impact. So we will share that, and I hope that everyone on this webinar will also share that talk. That was amazing. Thank you so much for being with us. And now it is an honor to introduce Andrea Zaffiraku, who is a teacher at Alperton Community School in Brent, and she is the winner of the $1 million prize from the Varkey Foundation for being the best teacher in the world, which is quite an accolade. But Andrea was born in Northwest London, and she is a textiles and art teacher. She is passionate about education and about changing lives of the young people that she teaches, and she's author of a fantastic new book which is out from Bloomsbury. It's called Those Who Can Teach: What It Takes to Make the Next Generation. And I know that we are just very delighted to have you with us, Andrea. I know you're an incredibly busy person, and it's wonderful that you're here. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Daisy. And I'm just a little bit still shell-shocked from Jaden's presentation. I mean, it was just so wonderful. Thank you, Jaden, for sharing your story and your passion. My talk today is about the power of the classroom and the power that teachers have over our young people. And over the last few months, I mean, it just shows you how incredible teachers are, because we've faced so much change, uncertainty. We really had to react quickly to fix things. And I know that many parents at home are now saying, oh my God, thank God, how do you do it? Thank you to teachers. So it's just been quite an interesting time for us. But there's been some good moments as well. So the good moments, talking about other teachers, the fact that, you know, I feel that I've become better as a practitioner. I've had to transform everything about myself, everything about the way I teach. I've had to think very carefully about the language I use, how I assess through this square box right here. It's been wonderful also seeing the quiet, calm, invisible children that we sometimes have in our classrooms, the ones that we don't really know how much progress they've made, because sometimes just by having that one-to-one attention, which more or less teaching in this format does have, we've just seen them excel. They've been thriving. They've had the support at home. They've had the environment that was able to kind of make sure they can thrive. And so we've seen these moments and these pockets where young people have just blown us away. And they are, and for us, our challenge is making sure that now they're back in school is to keep them going and embracing that newly found confidence. But there's also been the bad, and the bad, personally speaking, has been the guilt. The guilt I have felt, the guilt I've experienced by always saying to myself, was that good enough? Was that lesson okay? Because I know that teaching my subject has been almost impossible to do the way that I would love to do it. And so I had this horrible guilt throughout my mind. Do they have pencils at home? Do they have paper? Oh no, they won't have this. Do they have paper? I doubt they'll have paper. And so that's been something that I've also had to kind of overcome as far as possible. But also on looking at the student side, the embarrassment of sometimes not being able to access because of the responsibility that they had, being a carer, having to more or less take over the household because one person was working in the household and the others couldn't cope without that child making sure that they were providing for the whole family. And then we had the ugly, and the ugly was hard. The ugly was really challenging. The ugly for us was the deaths of the family members. The ugly for us were the students who we know came to light in terms of their safeguarding issues, concerns, and also the ugly, the ones who disappeared. And those were the ones who really hurt, the ones who we could not engage. That it doesn't matter how many phone calls, how many police visits, that they were not engaging. The fact that when you'd call home to say, where is your son, where is your daughter, the parents were just waking up and it was 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So you sometimes feel, you know, that was the ugly moment for me during this whole pandemic. So coming back to the school, coming back to a school, how do we feel? Well, I can probably speak on behalf of 99% of teachers in this country. I'm absolutely delighted. I'm thrilled. I want to be in my classroom because as far as I'm concerned, the classroom is a place where magic happens and they're powerful places. Yes, we teach about the curriculum, but there's so much more that happens in classrooms. And I just want to tell you a couple of stories from teaching and experiences of who my best teachers were. Now, many of you out there, if I say to you, oh, you know, who was your best teacher? It would take you less than a second to say, oh, it was Mr. Jones or Mrs. Harper or Mr. Patel. Yes, that my drama teacher, my English teacher, he taught me this, she taught me that. If you were to ask me, I'd probably say, it was my student Alvaro. And I'm going to talk you through some of my student stories here, because no matter what I have learned through my education in terms of going to teacher training college, the amount of books I've read, I have become a better teacher. I am a good teacher because of the things I have learned from my students. So Alvaro was a young man who came to our school when he was in year 10. So he moved from a special educational needs school to my school. And it was very strange because he had many special educational needs labels, and one of them was a selective mute. And when he came, I remember that I was in my early years of teaching, and the head of year at the time said, and Mr. Zaffiraku, this is Alvaro, I'd like you to meet him. He's going to be joining your class. He's come from the special school down the road. And I was slightly taken back. I didn't have much data about this particular student. I wasn't sure how to engage with this particular student because he was absolutely terrified. And I remember meeting his parents, and they gave us a call. And one of the things which they said to us was, we just want our son to go to a normal school. So in terms of expectations, there were very little expectations. And the fact that even the family didn't think that their child could get a GCSE. Alvaro came into the school, into my classroom, and my art room is fairly, I'd say, energetic most of the times. He came into my classroom and he was an absolute, and I'll never forget, he was an absolute tiny creature. His head was down, he was, you know, completely shell-shocked, eyes fixed on the floor. He came in, he sat where he was meant to sit, and I went up to him and I said, Alvaro, you know, do you like art? Would you like to draw? Would you like to paint? And there was just no movement whatsoever, just stoic like this. The rest of the class were doing observational drawing, so I just put some paper and a pen on there. I just said, look, if you can, just have a go at drawing this object. The lesson went, and after 45 minutes it was finished. And then what happened was, just before the end of the lesson, I just set a task for the students. Can you please draw an object at home, an observational drawing at home, so that we can develop it next lesson. There was a stampede to the door as normal because it's lunchtime and the students are starving, and off Alvaro went with them. The next lesson, the students came back. I collected in the homework. I went up to Alvaro and I said, Alvaro, did you do the homework? Nothing, no signs, no nothing, no anything. And I felt like, oh my God, you know, no one dares not hand in their homework to me. No one ever does that. But he did. And as the students again left after the lesson, and once again Alvaro did not engage and he did not do anything, I saw him from the corner of my eye whilst I was speaking to some other students. He came and he dropped a piece of paper on my table. I did one of those, you know, I don't know if you know, but teachers, it's genetically ingrained in us. We have 3,000 eyeballs all around our heads. We have to have these. We have these sensors. We're like you know, radioactive spiders. We just sense everything. And from this part of my head, I sensed Alvaro coming up and putting a piece of paper on my table. And I did one of those kind of double looks, and I saw what he had produced, and it was breathtaking. It was a drawing of a bass guitar, and it was a tonal drawing which he probably copied from the internet, but it was spectacular. The strings, you could see the way that he captured the light even on the tiniest detail. The tone was wonderful, the light in which he hit, and it was just so sensitively done, and I can still visualize the image beautifully in my head. I saw that, and at that particular moment in time, I screamed. I absolutely screamed. I was like, ah! Stop! I probably just traumatized the poor child at that moment, but I ran up to him and I said to him, oh my God, did you do this work? Alvaro, look at me. Did you do this piece of work? He then looked at me, and then for the first time ever, I saw his beautiful, bright grey eyes. Alvaro, did you do this work? He nodded. Okay, right, okay, so, oh my God, it's amazing, oh my God, okay, so ran to the back of the classroom, ripped papers from some old sketchbooks, looked at the bottom of my drawer. There must be some pencils, there must be right, got some pencils and some a packet of oil pastels from the bottom of my drawer, threw them in the bag, went up to him, face on, and said, Alvaro, this is amazing. I want you to draw anything for me, anything, just draw. I want you to fill up these papers with paper. Do you understand, Alvaro? Do you understand? Alvaro, do you understand? Just nod or do that. Do you understand? And off he ran, escaping this crazy, wild art teacher woman. It was August 2017, August 2017, that's right. It was exam day. I was in school. I was biting my nails. Oh my God, what's going on? Has he passed? Has he not passed? He rushed up to me with his mum and they both squeezed me. They hugged me. Miss, have you seen my grades? I've got a grade D. I've got a grade D. Miss, thank you, I've got a grade D. My mouth dropped. Mum was crying. And then they were both celebrating. They said to me, but what's wrong, Miss Zaffiraku? Why are you not happy? And I said, because you could have got a grade A. Because if you came to my classroom when you were in year 7, we could have done this. To cut a very long story short, because time is running out, Alvaro stayed for 2 more years and he managed to do A-levels in our school. And again, that's a blessing from the leadership of the school, allowing the student to do A-levels. Remember, that's the only GCSE he had. He got an A for his A-levels too. Now, the thing that I learned about Alvaro was, number one, I had low expectations. I had low expectations for this child. And unfortunately, that's something that we need to break. His parents thought he couldn't. I initially thought he couldn't, but I knew and I saw that through the power of the art rooms, through the power of my classroom, through the power of having belief in a young person, of finding that thing that will unlock his potential, he has succeeded. And for me, the beauty about this story, and that I will never, ever, ever forget, is the fact that not only did he become a confident young man, not only could we not shut him up from speaking. Remember, he was selected mute, but he could not stop talking. But he was able to talk and teach the other young students in the art room as well. So from all those, I've been teaching for about 15 years now, and I'm still teaching. And the things that I've learned about what makes a great classroom is the fact that a teacher needs to be the person who young people want to talk to, want to build relationships with. You need to be a teacher who is willing to be tough, fair, but absolutely kind as well. And you are a kind of a teacher who really is passionate about their subject and teaching. If they see that you are someone who loves being in the classroom, who loves being in the presence, there is no way they will fail you there. And just to finally finish off, I know we've had a very traumatic time being teachers and over these last few months. And again, I want to salute the amazing profession that we're in. But I'm very grateful for the knowledge and wisdom that I've had from my school and the colleagues around the world and from my students. And that it is honestly a privilege to work in education in this country. Thank you.
Andrea, thank you so much. That was so passionate and engaging and inspiring, and it was just a delight to be able to hear from you about the magic of the classroom and all the incredible work that you do. And your book, which is called Those Who Can Teach, What It Takes to Make the Next Generation, is out now. And I hope that everyone will pick up a copy of it from New and Bookshop or from whatever is your local bookshop. Thank you so, so much, Andrea. And I know that with the prize money, you have founded Artists in Residence, which is improving arts education in schools and creativity. And I think it kind of resonates with our next speaker, Charlotte Church, who is, of course, well known to us all as a singer-songwriter, an actress, and a TV presenter, but who has started a very, very inspiring project in Wales, which launched in 2019, and it's called the Awen Project. It's a school for the future built to excel in the present, and it is happening from Charlotte's house, and it's where she's speaking to us from this evening. So welcome, Charlotte, and thank you very, very much for being with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and hear all these other speakers, so thank you very much for having me. I'm not here to talk about mainstream education. I don't work in it, and I'm not in any position to comment. I am instead here to tell you about an entirely different way of organizing learning spaces, a way fit for the present and adaptable for the future. I suppose my idea began when reflecting on my own education. From the age of 12, I was touring the world, doing business, singing in stadiums, learning maths on transatlantic flights. It was extreme, but it was immersive. My actions had real-world consequences. The learning was visceral, but it was amazing, and I loved it. Now, when it came to educating my own children, after visiting local primary schools, I started to feel that to send my 3- and 4-year-olds off to be educated for the vast amount of their childhood felt really unnatural, which I wasn't expecting at all. I was expecting to just follow the normal route. So we tried a Steiner kindergarten for a little bit, which was lovely, but the school wasn't quite right. So we became accidental homeschoolers. After a shaky start, we eventually loved every aspect of it, the freedom, the creativity, and we even invited other children to join us. Now, by the time my kids were approaching secondary school age, it was obvious that they needed more time with their peers. And truth be told, I don't believe that the traditional methods of instruction are humane, let alone effective. My kids were only going to get one childhood, and if I could do something to create an alternative system for them, then shouldn't I try? Over my years of homeschooling, I'd become really fascinated with the psychological and neuroscientific research into how humans learn best. And as an activist, I saw the most effective way of changing the future was by changing the way we provide learning environments for our young people and offering it for free. I've basically spent the last 3 years doing about a PhD's worth of research. I've spoken to thousands of practitioners in education. I visited schools all over the country. Oh, sorry, I've just got it. I visited schools all over the country, from a social, emotional, mental health school in Barnsley to Eton College. Armed with that knowledge and with the DIY attitude of a garage punk band, my husband and I set about learning how to drag a school into existence, writing curricula and policies, engaging educators and parents, liaising with Estin and county council planners. We finally registered our school in December 2019 for 20 students aged 9 to 14. Free to attend, with the pledge of 4 hours per month of parental volunteer time, co-created with the students and their families, entrepreneurial and driven by necessity, run by a participatory democracy, self-financing, and with a passion-based curriculum focused on relationships to the self, community, and the planet. It almost killed us, but we opened with enormous optimism and were mostly successful. Our first project was an interior design project where they were given a completely blank space, which was the annex of my house. And they had a massive collaborative project adhering to a list of scavenger rules that we co-wrote to assure sustainability. And they created an amazing learning space for themselves. Following on from this, we had a public exhibition entitled The I in Us, celebrating the view of the individual within community. And we had all sorts of different individual pieces from the kids, short films, comic books, mixed material sculptures of cast iron, paper and wicker, works on canvas, clay animation, and even a hand-stitched kimono. As one Awen student, Ethan, who was 11, said, "I love going to school now. I think I have become more confident and my social skills have improved when meeting new people. I feel I can have the freedom to get creative and learn in the ways that I like. I found mainstream school difficult and frustrating." But by Christmas, my husband and I were reaching serious burnout. By January 2020, we were running full-time 5 days a week. We couldn't help but notice that the active parental engagement that had been so strong when we'd been running part-time in the beginning had waned significantly. Some parents still wanted to be a big part, others were becoming more distant, and this was affecting the students. COVID changed everything, as it did for everyone. We lost the use of our premises, we lost our funding opportunities, we couldn't afford to keep on staff, so we used the last of our funding to get us through to summer online, uncertain of our future. By September 2020, we had decided to suspend our official school registration and started to operate as a learning community in the woods 3 days a week with only a parachute in the trees for shelter. The students at this point began to talk of themselves as a tribe, their bonds of community forged in the fire of adversity, and a culture of integrity around our values began to emerge. Processes of peer assessment and group appraisal evolved naturally, and a sort of caring kinship and group resilience developed as we got wilder, closer to the earth and the fire pit. As one of our parents, Nikki Blenman, put it, Awen is not just somewhere you send your child. Awen will allow your child to explore and discover who they are, and the environment will bring out their best qualities. Through the winter and the subsequent lockdown, a clarity emerged around what the Awen Project needed to become. A new model for democratic learning communities, a bridge between home education and school, a wholly accessible alternative to mainstream schooling for all students of all ages, where young people are supported to become self-directed learners, a community that extends care, support, and coaching to the families of its members, a place where a coherent curriculum can cross between the differing contexts of home and school, a place where children's rights are celebrated and upheld, particularly their right to choose, where they are consenting participants rather than forced or coerced into compliance. One of our youngest students, Chloe, age 9, says, "Kids should be educated this way because it's fair." I think that says it all. The Awen Project has always had the lofty aim of being entirely self-financing, using the profits from student and community-led businesses to pay for operations. This has always stood as an uncomfortable uncertainty within our business plan. But what we inadvertently created in lockdown was an incredibly low-cost model, without the overheads of a building, and with parents and other community members picking up a lot of the non-teaching roles. Our only really significant costs are our teachers, and they are worth every penny. We always wanted our model to be copyable, and by making a very low-cost education, this means that's so much more possible. From September 2021, we will be running teacher-led sessions Monday to Thursday, 10 till 2, with parent groups leading community activities like building and growing food in the afternoons. Optional community outings will happen on Fridays, set by teachers, but led by students and parents. And our students will continue to build their portfolios, collections of their best work through their school career, which in time will likely include a number of GCSEs if they want to do them. But they will not be forced or coerced. In partnership with the Woodland Trust, we will continue to operate and grow our learning community in South Wales, but also help new learning communities to sprout up around the UK and in time the world. These communities will form a network that can share resources, staff and facilities. We will set up teacher training, after-school clubs, holiday camps and education festivals that can help to empower student voice and encourage democracy within the mainstream. These endeavours could also be a major income stream for the project. Awen could represent a lower cost, more humane, more diverse community builder if we start to reform our communities around the education of our children. We will learn to listen, and we will learn to learn. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much to Big Change and 5x15 for holding this event. I'd just like to leave you with 2 questions. With all the discussion in 2021 around consent and coercion, is it morally acceptable that we systematically coerce children into action and never ask for their consent? A great deal of children, teachers, and parents are unhappy with the school system as it is. If the school system is only held together by all the energy that goes into sustaining it, what would happen if those people redirected their energies into creating something that made them happy? Thank you for your time.
Charlotte, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this incredibly inspiring and amazing project, and just mind-blowing to think of all that you've achieved and the ambition for the future. So congratulations, and thank you very, very much for talking to us about the Awen Project and the beautiful images of Wales. It was really exciting and really inspiring. So thank you to all of these incredible speakers this evening. We've been so lucky to have Charlotte Church with us, Andrea Zaffiraku, Jaden Caulfield, Laura McInerney, Adam Grant, Holly Branson, who introduced the partners at Big Change. And I want to say a big thank you, especially to Karine Goddard for all the amazing help in programming this evening, and to Big Change for bringing this all together. So you can sign up and be part of the Big Change education conversation, which is happening this summer. The link is www.bigeducationconversation.org. Speaker books are available, and we will send a follow-up email tomorrow for a bit more information about Big Change and about our speakers and their organizations. But for tonight, thank you all for being part of this. We've had hundreds of people on the webinar. Thanks for all your tweets and feedback, and we will see you all very, very soon. Stay safe and stay well. All right, good night.